All right, guys, today I'm going to be looking at the Fosi Audio TB10D. It's a little two-channel stereo amplifier sent to me by Fosi. Um, and I did reach out to them because I've used and reviewed some of the other products and been uh, satisfied for the price. The performance, everything's been pretty great on everything. So I figured, why not look at a few more of their items? So we start with this one. Maybe in the future I'll have a few other things. We'll just get right into. We'll look at the outside, and then we'll see what it comes. Well, yeah, we'll look it over real quick, see what's included. Talk about some of the specs. Uh, like a lot of these little amplifiers, just a small, uh, all metal aluminum box. Very nice. This is Class D, so it doesn't. It's rather efficient. Not much. Not much for venting because it doesn't really get hot or anything. So, and it's, as you can see, it's very small. Like a lot of these, they fit in your hand. So it's just crazy how small some of this stuff is able to get versus the power that we can get out of it now. Granted, the size is due so much smaller due because the power brick is not inside of it. If the power supply was inside of this, then it would have to be much bigger. We'll look at that in a second. But yeah, going over the outside, no venting, just really nice black aluminum. I think you can get it in black or silver. Start with the front. You get a nice little metal, nice heavy clicky power switch. I'll plug it in a little later. We can see this. There's a little indicator LED there. And this amplifier does give you a treble and bass tone control. So that's nice if you want to use them. If not, neutral I think is just right in the middle. And then obviously your volume knob. And it is nice to see on a lot of the other ones, they usually on bass and treble, there would be markings, but on a lot of these, throughout different brands, they would never put an indicator mark on the volume knob. So if you had it cranked up, having fun, partying or drinking or doing something, just rocking out, and you, oh, I gotta go, you shut it off and leave, and there's no indicator on the knob, you have no idea, or just somebody wants to play a joke on you and they have it cranked all the way up, and there's no marking, you don't know, you turn it on and everything starts blaring. So it is so nice to see that they're putting in that indicator on there, so you can kind of see, where your volume is. It's something so simple. I don't know why a lot of amplifiers quit doing it. And these knobs are very smooth. They have they're metal as well, and then I don't know how to put it. They have a very smooth action. They are not segmented. Or what would they call it? I can't think of the word, but they don't have like little clicks for each stepping or whatever. It's just a smooth knob, kind of like a vintage stereo, but you can tell on the pot or whatever in there, they put a nice, very thick grease on them, so they are very just thick and silky smooth. Very nice. Then again, the power switch is a nice heavy metal. Good power switch. Should last a long time. Really, this thing, since it's all metal, it should last a very long time. Nice thick grippy rubber feet on the bottom, so it doesn't slide anywhere. It holds its own. It's got just enough weight to it as well, so even if you were plugging in some heavier cables or whatever on the back, it's not just going to slide around. The feet are grippy, combined with its little bit of weight, it stays put. Then the only other thing really to look at is the back. You get some nice binding posts on the back. Let me see if I have a set of speaker cables sitting around here. All right, you can see here. These are typical. I mean, these are really small binding posts, so if you're worried they won't accept a full-size banana plug, they use these on almost all these little amplifiers, even the expensive ones, which we'll see later. Even though they're small, they are plenty deep. I remember right, if you look on the inside, they actually go all the way through. So even a full-size set of banana plugs they will accept full-size banana plugs, which is really nice. Because I'd imagine a lot of people at first seeing these really small binding posts might wonder, whether they can or not. They do have the hole through here. So if you don't want to use banana plugs, you just want to strip some wire and twist it and poke it through there and tighten them down, you can do that as well. So banana plugs are not required with these. You can still just use bare wire if you want. And then as far as input obviously, this is only, I think, around a $70 amplifier. So obviously the features are going to be limited, but it has the main one that's important, and this has a regular unbalanced analog input, which there's all kinds of things you can connect to this. And if you had more than one thing you wanted to connect to an amplifier like this, they do make rather inexpensive RCA switches that allow you to hook 4 different things into one, and it just has the switch buttons on the top. But typically what you would do with this is you take your RCAs, plug them in here, and then get your RCA cable. It's the RCA to auxiliary, or 3.5 millimeter. And then this you can plug into a phone, into back of your computer, your laptop, MP3 player. There's all kinds of things that are going to use this 3.5 millimeter or auxiliary plug. So just having those alone is going to give you a lot of options. You can even, if you wanted to, they make Bluetooth adapters that connect to this. So just having those 2 plugs, it is very limited, but it's still, you're going to have plenty of options. It just is going to depend how many things you want to hook to it at once, I suppose. And most of the time, it's just one thing, like hooking a phone or a computer, and then you have your streaming service, so you kind of got everything coming through one thing. And there's the world of having lots of different, CD player, tape player, phone, all these different audio sources is becoming less and less common-ish. For most people, that's going to be just fine. It's going to be enough. Now, moving on into specs, we'll look at the power supply first. You get a nice power brick cord, and then, and then the other power adapter for the figure 8 plug or whatever they call it here. And then this is, it says in the description too, online and all that, it's a 32 volt 5 amp. And we'll get back to that in a second, that 32 volts and 5 amps. And then I did want to mention on the power plug here, you see here, some of these older ones I had, not specifically Fosi brand, but I've had a handful of these mini amplifiers and stuff, and they all use the same socket type DC plug or whatever. But a lot of the old ones, they used to only have maybe these contacts in here. There used to maybe only be like one on the bottom or just one on the side, and just wasn't that great. It would get loose and be really, plug would be really flimsy in there and stuff. It's good to see in a lot of these new ones, especially this one, that you can see it has the contacts all the way around in there. It is a much better quality power plug. So when you plug your cord in, this is much sturdier. I have some of these where this cord over time, even not taking it in and out, just over time for having a little tension on it and stuff, it gets become rather loose and it doesn't want to stay in there because it is just not a very good quality DC power socket or whatever you want to call it. I don't remember the actual model for this plug, but yeah, having this is much better quality. It fits in there much better, and it seems much more snug. And then also when hooking these up, always plug this in first and then plug it into the wall. So, set that over there out of the way. Getting into some specs on this now. I just got Fosi's website pulled up right here. I'm going to use their site. It's their marketing. It's their data. So that's what we're going to use. Now for power supply, up 32 volt, 5 amp. And to figure out what your wattage is, it's real simple. It's just volts times amps. So 32 times 5 is 160 watts is what this, if this power adapter was 100% efficient, which it isn't, because none of them are, it could produce 150 or 160 watts. Okay, as I was saying, a slight interruption there. As I was saying, this power adapter, the 5 volt 32 amp is only going to be capable, I don't know exactly, but it would come out to 160 watts, but that would be 100% efficiency, which doesn't happen. So maybe 140, 150 watts max. So when we move on to one of the next specs here, where they say output power is 300 watts times 2 or 600 watts, that's not true at all. This is not a 600 watt or 300 watt times 2 amplifier. What they mean by that is the Texas Instruments, I believe it's the TPA3255 amplifier chip, provided enough power correctly and everything, can output up to 600 watts in a specific scenario with a big enough power supply. But the way it is configured here with the power brick you get, not even close, which doesn't matter. 300 watts times 2 or 600 watts times 1 is a lot of power. More than probably any home consumer would ever need. We'll get, after this, I'm going to go into more of the Audio Science Reviews testing on it, where they actually test. Audio Science Review, great page. They actually test a lot of this stuff, and then you can kind of see what the real world specs of this sort of stuff is, because a lot of times the manufacturer specs are heavily exaggerated or just incorrect. In this case, the main one that's incorrect is the 300 watts times 2 or 600 watts, and that's mostly gimmick marketing. Fosi, I wish you guys wouldn't do that. A lot of it, it's not just you, a lot of other these companies all do that. It's not necessarily, it's not a lie, but it's not true in this scenario. And a lot of these other companies do the same thing with THD rating. Well, they'll say, oh, this amplifier is 300 watts at like 10% THD, which is terrible, you know. And they'll rate it that high at that high THD just so they can put that bigger number in the marketing. Because too many people buying their amplifier off how many watts it puts out. It's not the way it should be done. Anyway, THD is 0.3%, which is great. That's for this price range, performance. 0.3 is, at least that's what they rate it. It is very good. Signal noise ratio is greater than 90 dB according to them, which is really good. Frequency range 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, very good. It will handle 2 to 8 ohm speakers, which is great. Gives you a good plenty of wiggle room there to hook up different speakers. And then you can see down here at the bottom, they've even included themselves some measurements from Audio Science Review themselves. And then tested at 5 watts, which is the standard. At 5 watts, you get a THD plus noise of 0.015% on both channels, which is excellent. And then your SYNAD, which I believe is a combination of signal to noise and distortion combined into a decibel, 75 dB, which is plenty good. I know some of these higher end amplifiers now, they're exceeding 100 dB SYNAD and stuff, and 75 is quite good. I think it was some Harman research that was done, or it's in the Harman. Most people, even good listeners or golden ears or whatever they call them, they found that most people, most people, probably 99%, really cannot determine much difference in audio quality or whatever, however you want to put it, really past 70 or 80 dB SYNAD. And I think that's why a lot of amplifiers are nowadays, that's kind of the target they aim for. That's what they want, because that's just, once you start getting beyond that, there's going to be very few people, because it's not just the amplifier, your input source, your material you're playing. So whether you're playing CD, something that was recorded with audiophile with precision in mind, whether you're just listening to Metallica or whatever. There's a lot of scenarios where once you get past that, most people, 99% of people, can't tell the difference. And then to be able to tell the difference past that, you have to have a very good source and very good speakers. A lot of things of which most people aren't going to have from top to bottom. This being rated around 75 dB SYNAD is plenty good. For most people, they're not going to be able to distinguish much past that anyway. And if you're just if you're just streaming music, or you're just playing CDs, and even though CD is capable of beyond 75 dB synad. Most CDs or most music is heavily compressed anyway, so that really brings it back down anyway. So 75 to 80 is usually more than enough for most people. So it's good to see that on this. We go over to, I brought it up on Audio Science Review, and you can go look for yourself. I'll link it in the description. They do all kinds of testing on all different sorts of equipment, and even Amir, the guy that started Audio Science Review, that does most testing, he even gave it a Happy Panther. A lot of the stuff is rated in Panthers, so it's good to see it got a Happy Panther. But what we mostly want to look at here is an example of these distortion ratings and all these other ratings, and it turns out a lot of these high-end amplifiers that cost thousands of dollars actually perform worse than some little affordable amplifiers like this. And a good example is he shows here. You can see it highlighted in yellow, but the amplifier right next to it says, interesting that the $5,900 Jeff Roland 535 amplifier lands almost right next to this amplifier in performance. And that's what happens. It's one of the biggest or most annoying things in the audio world is there's really no standard like pricing ratio. It's just all over the map. It's just because something costs $5,000, it might look pretty, it might weigh 100 pounds, be full of copper and gold and all, doesn't mean it's any good at all. It's just audio jewelry half the time. So, and I mean, there's a whole bunch of other, amplifiers that fall pretty close in its range that are big names, Emotiva, Crown, Outlaw. Let's see, what was that other one? There's a Klipsch that's way below it, So it's kind of interesting to see when the stuff is actually tested. Just a lot of times, just because it's way more expensive doesn't mean it's necessarily better. In this case, this amplifier lands in a very good spot. It's not, it's not the best. It's by far not the worst. It's extremely good value for the money as far as performance. I'm trying to find where it's measured for actual rated power. If you guys want to see all the deeper specs on this, you can. I'll link it in the description. You can go over to Audio Science Review and check it out. For max power, both channels, and that's not continuous power. That's going to be almost like I don't know if they consider that like peak power, but max power was 88 watts times 2, which is quite a bit of power for a little amplifier like this. That's going to be enough power for most people, unless you're using some really inefficient speakers. Continuous power is what I'm looking for. It looks like continuous power into 8 ohms is you get 46 watts into 8 ohms, which is really good. It doesn't show what he was getting into 4 ohms, but it's usually roughly double that, so probably going to get around maybe 70 to 80 watts times 2 into 4 ohms, roughly, which is still, it's not the 300 watts times 2 that they advertise. Even if you are getting, we'll say, 50 watts times 2 into 8 ohms and 70, 80 watts times 2 into 4 ohms, that's really good. That's going to be plenty of power for most people, unless you have a very large room or you're using some very inefficient speakers. For most people, that's going to be plenty of power. Now, moving on into the price to performance. At 70 bucks, this is absolutely great performance. The amount of power you get versus your THD, your synad, everything. This is a great little amplifier as far as specs. Now, I still have this around. This amplifier, doesn't really matter what model or anything. This amplifier, structurally, when you hold them, it feels about the same, other than it's heavier, but they're both metal all around, whatever. This one does have a few more options, but this amplifier is $660. Almost 10 times the cost of this one. And it's a Class A instead of a Class D, but it doesn't really matter at this second. But again, it's only got a set of RCA inputs. It does have a headphone jack output, fine, but $70, $660. These are the exact same binding posts. Granted, this one has the power brick built in right here on the side. So if Fosi wanted to make their case a little larger, put the power brick right there on the side. But you're getting a lot of the same. Yeah, this one has a couple little features that really don't do anything for the audio quality or the fidelity. On the inside, this is, since it's Class A, it's got all these premium heavy-duty components and everything. And when you look up the spec sheets, the THD's got a lot more zeros in it, and the output power is actually lower, but that's just because it's Class A. All these fancy things in here that give this better numbers. When I hook these both up and listen to them back to back over and over and over with different speakers, I would probably, how do I want to put this? They don't really sound that different. If I left the room and had somebody change everything around, it would probably take me a second to kind of realize which one is the Class A, which one is the Class D. Because, I mean, it helps this Class A is not super Class A-ish sounding. It does, once you kind of sit and listen to it and listen to different tracks, then you detect the kind of the signature Class A-ness. But it doesn't sound I don't know how to put it. It doesn't have as much of the classic Class A sound as some of the older or other Class A amplifiers. I'd almost say it's kind of like a hybrid Class A. But either way, when it comes to just excusing sound signatures, when it just comes to fidelity, I would pick this one. I mean, it's Class D. It sounds very neutral. It's not overdone in the treble, not overdone in the bass. I mean, and you get your tone control, so you could adjust for that if you wanted to the way you like it. But as far as just clarity and detail and everything, even though this one has much better specs, we're beyond that point at which people can really determine a difference in quality. I think I did sit there and listen back and forth, and unless I was very particular to the Class A sound, when it just comes down to fidelity, I would pick this one every single time, no problem. And it seems to go that way with a lot in the audio world. The other thing that was interesting is this one. I was blown away that, and I was just for plain flat out testing, I was just using the Sony CS5 bookshelf speakers because they're super popular, they're well reviewed, and it's going to be a bookshelf speaker a lot of people have. I was able to actually just turn this all the way to max. It's loud as hell, but a lot of these you start to find their weakness, and the older ones, you start getting up around 3/4 volume. You start getting past that, they start falling apart. The distortion just gets real bad. The amplifier just can't handle it. It just starts falling apart. It sounds terrible. This one, 100% volume sound. I mean, other than being so loud, it was really not pleasant to listen to. No distortion. I mean, it's so loud it'd be hard to notice much distortion anyway, but it was, I mean, I guess if I was in a little bit bigger room, back a little bit further, it would have been fine. This one, on the other hand, same speakers, same everything, start to turn it up. I got within about 90% of its max power, and it just got to the point where it's unlistenable. It's just terrible, which is really disappointing for a $660 amplifier versus a $70 amplifier. That should not happen. So it's those kind of things, and it's not every single high-end. There is expensive audio gear that does perform very well, but it's not always the case. And I'm doing this because this is one of those perfect scenarios. If I had these two to pick from, unless I was completely biased to I want to have that little bit of that Class A sound, there's no way I would pay 10 times the money for this versus this. It's just not going to happen. The performance difference is literally not there. And the fidelity difference is not there, however you want to put it. And really, just experimenting with the both of them, if I just left the treble alone and then just turned the bass up just a touch on this one, it kind of brought out, because Class A kind of has a warmer, smoother low end, so it's a little kind of I guess, a richer, bassier sound. But then the bass is, to me, is a little less defined. There's a little more of it. It's warmer and smoother. It's nice, but it's less defined. This, you could almost get a similar, we'll just say a similar sound, that Class A sound, by just turning the bass up just a tad. Other than the bass is still a little more defined, a little more, what would they say, transient. Anyway, I just thought I would compare these two, because I've had this with other amplifiers and other speakers where just because it was expensive, it's supposed to be so much better. In very few cases, or not very often, that's the case. I would say, well, I don't want to give a percentage. I'm going to say most of the time, when I have a high-end audio product next to we'll just say an affordable audio product, and unless there's a huge feature set difference, sometimes you're going to pay for certain features. But if they have comparable features like these two, very rarely is the more expensive one worth the difference. Like I just said, and I'm kind of rambling on here. This amplifier is not worth 10 times this one. I mean, maybe if you just have plenty of money and you don't care, maybe it is, whatever. But if you were to create some sort of performance standard, ratio between these two, this is not 10 times better. Not even close. And it just goes that way with a lot of the stuff. It gets really annoying, because it can make it hard to find products that you like that will do the job and will do everything you need it to do without spending way too much money. So anyway, I think Fosi did a great job with the TB10D. At $70, it's a great little 2-channel amplifier. I mean, if that's all you're looking for, it's going to have plenty of power. It'd be a great little desktop amplifier. I guess I didn't point out, the one thing I don't like is it doesn't have a remote, but a lot of these little amplifiers don't. They do have other models that cost a little more, that have a screen and then do have a remote. Maybe they'll send me one of those. But as far as like a dorm room, desktop, garage, somewhere where you don't necessarily need to have access to the volume knob, or if you're going to use it like with a computer or something else like your phone or something, you could just set the volume like you would on a power amplifier to the kind of the max you'd ever want it at, and then you would control your volume, or you'd preamp it with your computer or phone or something else. And that would give you an option to kind of remotely control the volume of it. And then plug it in, you get I said I would do it, so you get a little green indicator light on the power brick. And then when you flip power on, you get a little subtle red, not eye-searing, just nice subtle red power indicator that lets you know it's powered on. So, but yeah, overall, excellent. It's good to see these small amplifiers mature very well without the price going through the roof, because for a lot of people, these are going to be a good option without needing like a whole big stereo receiver or anything. So, and then I'll link this one in the description, and I'll just link Fosi and this in the description, because they have a lot of other amplifiers stuff with, like I said, that do offer remotes, built-in Bluetooth and other things. So there will also be a link in the description for a $15 off coupon code if you wish to purchase it from Fosi Audio's website. So that'll be in the description. But I think that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, guys. See you later.